Yeah.
It's still want us to come up. You want us to come up?
It's Jeremy.
As
Yeah,
opposed
you
to
could have stopped there.
the ugly light.
Rightio.
Is Jeremy participating?
No, Jeremy's an apology.
He's an apology.
Yeah.
Rightio, folks. Welcome here to this regional services meeting. We'll get underway pretty quick. We've got quite a heavy agenda to get through. There's a lot of items there, a lot of reports. So we'll just move to the apologies first. Any apologies? I've got some here, but any from the floor first before I read these? I'll read these out. Apology, Gail Thompson and Estelle Lesk.
Those two.
We've got those in. Councillor McPhail. Anybody else? No, it's this Councillor Morrison's not here. No, we're going to talk about that a bit later on and topic excluded about that future of that. Okay, so who can move those apologies, please? John and second. Von Lindell. All those in favour?
Aye.
Yeah, against. Carried. Thanks very much. Declarations of interest. Okay, so move to number 4, public forum, petitions and deputations. Not hearing anything out there. Confirmation of the minutes from the last meeting. Anything outstanding there you want to?
I'll move it.
Okay. Any discussion on those minutes? Okay. Got a mover and seconder. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Notification of extraordinary items. Not hearing anything again, so we'll move to 7 questions. I don't have anything written in front of me here. Right, we're moving through things. Chairman and councillors' reports. Surely we've got some of those from any councillors. No one want to talk about anything regarding the regional services? That they've done anything? No. Okay, that's fine. I haven't got anything either. And now we'll move to the items. As I say here, I assume all the committee members have read all this, so there is a lot of items here, and you'll see going right down from 1 to 8. So we'll start on number 1, operational. I'm just going to get to where I am first. Operational back catchment integration. Yes.
Through you, Chair, we'll take the approach that most, largely the reports have been read. There'll be some highlights that we'll want to no doubt take you through, and I do know that there's a wee presentation that we can quickly go through as well, which captures some of the work in Ariti, which Fiona and Ali and the team will take you through.
Very good. All is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as Paul said, we'll take our catchment integration report as read. What we would like to do, however, is to take you through a shortish, quick presentation. Each time we come to regional services, we bring another couple of catchments, in this case the Oreti and the Aparima, and go through some of the activities going on in those catchments in particular. Obviously you're very familiar with Ali to my left, but to my right is Josephine Stewart. Josephine is a land sustainability officer in the team, and is here just to provide some support today, and unfortunately she's just been unwell, but Jodie Crane is our new team leader for the Oreti catchment. So just keen to kind of have the councillors understand and know who some of the people are that are working out in our community. So without further ado, you'll see some similarities, and apologies for I'm stepping into this presentation in the 11th hour. So the focus catchments for this conversation are the Oreti and the Aparima. Where is this around? Will it be sometimes? Yeah, I did. Go. Right. Okay, nice. Magic. Excellent. So as for the previous catchments, we've started with the draft freshwater vision. So clearly freshwater is not the only topic of interest in these catchments, but there's work going on the left-hand side around Hauora being the real focus for our freshwater in both the Arete and in the Aparima. And if you look to the right-hand side, those visual pictures are ones that we have on our water story information, and they should tell the picture of Kutikatai, mountains to sea, some of the key issues that we know of in terms of consenting, in terms of discharges, in terms of knowledge around these catchments. So again, just setting the scene for the Arete. Obviously the Five Rivers area comes through from Centre Hill, comes through to Lumsden and then down to the River Estuary. Aparima sort of tucks in alongside that quite closely actually, and it starts up in the Hamilton and does a bit of a corner and then comes down through into the Jacobs River Estuary. And of course, we know that Aparima in particular suffered one of the most significant floods in many years, some in the last couple of weeks. So speaking from personal experience, there has been quite a lot of cleanup going on and certainly water in places that we had never seen before. So in terms of the Southland catchment groups, and I thought it was useful to share this information. Obviously, we know, I think that we have 36 catchment groups across Southland. In the Aparima, we have 5, in the 6 actually. In the Arete, we have 8 catchment groups, and then there's another, most actually populated in terms of catchment groups within the Taura. We've been working really closely, and I wanted to give an example of the Arete with our GIS team and with the catchment groups to create boundary maps. So these boundary maps are available currently now. They'll be on our website as well as on the Thriving Southland website, and they provide information, as you can see up on the slide there, the physiographic, soil types, waterways, roads and property boundaries. And there's an opportunity to actually add more data and information to these boundary maps. This came from a request from the catchment groups to have more information available online about their particular catchment area. So we're really pleased to be able to bring that information together and make it quite accessible. It's a tool, so it is a tool to that farmers and catchment group people will use in terms of clicking on the area, and they will get information like this. So for the Mid-Arete, we've got boundaries around their catchment group area, and that's again being done in conjunction with the catchment groups and Thriving Southland and also our GIS people. And then here is so that's an example of how you can take the boundary, take the broader map and then hone in really closely on some of the property areas or particular parts of that catchment. And so again, it came from that desire from people in catchment groups to better understand what knowledge there was around their catchment areas and to use that as part of their planning for actions and activities within the catchment. Here's another example from our Mid-Arete friends, and obviously we've got the physiographic maps on the left and the soil maps on the right. So again, there's opportunity to include a whole range of data that actually helps empower catchment groups to make those decisions, but also to have that stronger understanding of what's going on in their local catchment in terms of issues and contaminant pathways and the in-stream health of the waterways. So those are just a couple of Arete examples. Just touching on the catchment groups for the Arete, so a number of us are supporting the catchment groups across the ICM group. So that's just a list down the left-hand side there of the catchment groups we're working with, and there's a number of particular projects now. And what we've found is the catchment groups being community-led. They tend to generate their own projects, and we work in with them to assist and give support as we can from particularly from a catchment integration perspective. But part of that also, as we did with those GIS maps, is working across the organisation and drawing on the strengths of the organisation to be able to bring that out into the catchment group space. And some of you I know will be familiar with these groups and going to field days will be aware of some of the initiatives that they have. Aparima is slightly different to the Arete, so obviously it has 6 catchment groups, so the Upper Mid and Lower Aparima, the Waimatuku, the Podokino and the Oropoki. But in contrast, I suppose, they came together in the last 3 or 4 years to run the ACE, the Aparima Community and Environment Project. And they're currently, I guess, if you like, phase one of that project is drawn to a close, and they're now looking and I know meeting amongst themselves to determine the next steps for that project and how they might work in terms of the community and the work they want to do, but also how they might align with some of the work that we have, particularly going on in South Auckland. I won't dwell on it today, but I did want to make mention of the future farming work stream, and councillors may or may not be aware of some of the work that went on with, I think, 6 farmers across the catchment area, the FMU area, to understand both the overseer losses from the farming system, and then also the financial implications and from the farmer's perspective. And then what happened was, using the actual real life farmer example, they tested different ways, like if you change things within the farming system, what implication would that have on the overseer losses, and what implication would that have in terms of the profitability of the property. So a lot of useful knowledge sitting in the background there in terms of that catchment. While we're late.
Click on the presentation. Click on the presentation.
Just, I think it's worth mentioning, and we've shared this recently externally as well, in terms of the work that's going on to, I guess, strengthen that relationship between the natural environment and work that we do with the people of the Arete and the Aparima. So environmental education is another space, and I probably won't go into a lot of detail, but you can see down the right hand side there a number of initiatives, all of which are underway in both with various schools. Arete in particular, we have our regional hui happening. Actually got a slide on that. So we've got a regional hui coming up in November at Hedgehope School, where they've got had a lot of work going on, and this has got a particularly strong biodiversity focus, and working in collaboration with all the TAs and with SIT on that piece of work, and we're co-connecting as well with the local runanga. So that's coming up, and I think the councillors have a meeting on that day, so probably can't attend. So we always enjoy having kind of councillors, but we know we'll probably have councillors from other councils attending, so that's quite cool. The other project that's actually quite important in terms of the lower Arete, and it starts to be where we interact not just with the farming community but also with the urban communities, is our Waihopai planting restoration site. And I would encourage councillors in the spare 5 minutes to drive to the end of Racecourse Road and walk up the path to have a read of the sign, maybe take a little sit down on the nice seat, but also view some of the plants, and there's work going on right now in terms of signage on those plants as well. So it's an exciting project, one that started many years ago, and I've been really quite thrilled. So there's a number of sites in that area that indicate the different years in which we, in terms of the growth of the plants. So, and also what we've learnt in the riparian planting space and biodiversity space.
No one fell in the water this time.
No, not in this one. No, the kids actually.
As you know, biosecurity is something that we look at regionally, but there are things that happen slightly differently in some catchments, and the Arete catchment, which we include Bluff in, which I know the Arete doesn't flow through, but we put it in, has got the 2 main population hotspots of Invercargill and Bluff, which means we've got lots of people, which means we've got lots of gardens, which means we've got lots of weeds. So it is the focus of quite a few of our eradication species, including purple loosestrife, which is the purple one in the middle, German ivy down at Bluff, and horsetail. The German ivy project is going really, really well. We went to an approach with ITC a few years ago where we got rid of everything, all of the weedy species, not just the cast weeds, to allow us to find the German ivy underneath, it was growing underneath everything. We could really then control the German ivy, and then ICC replanted it with native vegetation. And that has been a much more effective way of doing the control in that area in a really tough site down on the coast than our previous approach, which was trying to just control the German ivy through everything else. So that one's going really well. In the Arete, we also have quite a bit of aggressive containment, particularly for reed sweetgrass, which actually grows in the water and along the margins of the river. It does get moved around in floods, so we need to go and do some good surveillance this year and see what's happened. But we do control it every year, so hopefully we can contain it. No go on in pine work, or a lot of it on the slopes of Mid-Dome falls into the Arete, so you'll all be familiar with the work that we do up on Mid-Dome. And then we have a species called Bonaria, I don't know how to pronounce it, which is down at Bluff, and we're finding it more and more in the gardens at Bluff, so we're trying to get on top of that one. The Alparima is slightly different. We don't have the same human garden issues that we have in Arete, but what we do have is old man's beard. So this is one of the species we're trying to get down to progressive containment, or hopefully down to zero density. There is a difference between old man's beard and the native clematis, depending on the times of year that they flower. So we are only looking for the exotic old man's beard, and we are trying to get as many sites as possible, but particular hotspots around Riverton and our Kowtow. In the pest animal space, we have got 21 possum control areas within the Arete. So actually, a lot of our possum control work happens in the Arete. We also do a high number of rabbit inspections there, particularly down the river corridors, because of the open habitat that the river creates. So, and it becomes a really good highway for pests moving up and down. So we do inspections up and down the river corridor. And we have quite a few questions from people on the route. So we're always dealing with service requests in that area for various different species. In the biodiversity space, we have got several environmental enhancement fund grants this year. There's currently 14 in the Arete catchment, valuing over $120,000 that we've given out. And there's 3 in the Alparima. So examples of what we've got is we've got regenerating forest and tackling with the weed issues, which is this picture here. So the weed control project to help that regenerating forest. We have got a trapping network along some riverside habitats to prevent things like this happening, which is black-fronted tern breeding and rats coming in and eating terns. So we're supporting a trapping project to prevent that happening. So lots of things happening in those 2 catchments in the biospace. I'm not sure if you said you.
And just to round off, we were able to have a quick conversation with our consents and compliance team. So obviously dairy inspections ongoing in this area, and I think it would be useful in the future to kind of bring a map actually giving some of this information so that you can see it visually. Obviously whitebait inspections have recently been quite a significant issue. Having said that, a number of stands washed away sadly in the floods. So the recent floods, as I indicated earlier, had quite an impact. We continue to monitor water abstraction permits and discharge permits, and we again ongoing monitoring. And there are a number of kind of consent applications that are a work in progress, but that information just isn't taken. So with that, I will draw our conclusion, our presentation to a conclusion.
Thanks very much. That's really good. There's a lot going on there, I know. We're going to take a few questions, so I'll start with Eric first.
Very fulsome report, but you didn't mention the Waimunu Charlton riparian plot. My interest in that is I was trying to figure out exactly where the activity had taken place, and I'm presuming it's by the substation on the Charlton Road and somewhere in the lower Waimunu. Now, my reason for asking the question, the Waimunu stream starts in the bush above Dollamore Park, runs on the eastern boundary of the Waimunu field days, and it would occur to me that doing something where there's a lot of people frequently, and having some kind of display would be a benefit, particularly at the Waitangi Field Day site, where 20,000 people come every second year.
I'm happy to answer that, Mr. Chairman.
You sure?
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, so thank you. Just through you, Mr. Chairman, two things, and I'll ask Josephine to comment on the locations of the planting. But just in terms of the note that's in our item here, we have a site at the field days, interestingly, that we did actively plant out and should still be there, probably quite well established. I have to say I went to it in my early days as a land sustainability officer, and the site that we have planted up was opposite where councillors probably would be familiar. We used to have our tent right by the creek there by the bridge. Yeah, so I think that would be a useful exercise to go back to that site. And in fact, if I can just try to keep my answer short, but we actually have a number of excellent demonstration sites around the region. Woodlands, Dacre, Pokero, Tiano, and also Wallistown, where farmers can actually see what riparian planting, and Waihopai, sorry, obviously, where farmers can actually, or others can go and view the benefits of riparian planting. And just very briefly, Josephine, locations for how many sites did we plant at in Charlton Waitangi?
So there were a total of 25 landowners, and some of them had multiple sites. I don't know the exact number of sites, but there was a spread across the Charlton and Waitangi area.
Can I just add that for a bit of clarification? You would have noticed that there was an agenda put out on the weekend, and there was a change made in it. So the report on what you're talking about from that project was just dropped for the meantime. Yeah, so that was an amendment of the agenda.
Right, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Boris?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Now, the riparian planting program, in terms of the survival of the trees that we plant and the overall cost per plant, cost benefit of the methods that you're using, are you analysing that to see whether or not that is the most cost-effective way? And I'm thinking of farmers themselves undertaking these programs. You know how difficult it is to get native trees to grow in an open, grassy area. Should we be thinking about that?
Yeah, so I think what would be best is that we come back to the committee on some of the detail of that information. Certainly, we've done some of that work through the Charlton Waimumu and some ongoing monitoring. And then the other thing we do is provide that ongoing support. We obviously don't pay, but we still stay in regular contact with the farmers who've got planting in place through the South Riparian program. And that's obviously front of mind. We also, so the Southern Riparian program is focused on planting native plants along waterway corridors, but there has certainly been a number of questions around could we broaden the scope in terms of planting out gullies and critical source areas and areas around wetlands. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is just that we're very conscious, and again, Council, Mr. Chairman, on the fact that yes, natives are great and some people want to do that, but there are also other species, and if you've got the right species in the right place, you know, other things like the right species of willow. So that's another thing that we're exploring, because some people may prefer to do that, and we want to be open to work with the farmer, and that could be a slightly less expensive and, you know, faster growing kind of alternative. Yeah, so we have to be conscious of working alongside the farmer, the landowner, in terms of what it is their kind of aims are.
Well, thank you, Chairman Hurrell.
Well, just on that subject, I had a text earlier to say that my 200 plants completed. That was my concern. I haven't got the time to look after plants. So we have a number of people on the list who sign up for a contract for 3 to 5 years. So I'm talking to 3 initially. They've got the release rate and plant.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see, because that was my concern, is you get some money and happen life's not good.
No.
And so I'm happy to maybe, and I think a lot of people will be that are busy. If you've got people that are doing it all the time and becoming a check with them by the time, I think that's a success rate. We have to report back in the next couple of years and take help on that.
That's really, Mr. Chairman, that is really important, that ongoing nation. So that's why we do. We obviously don't fund it, but we do that ongoing reminder and support to make sure that that farmers are actually kind of like keeping an eye on that and to do.
There will be a report in time, I take it, back from the project itself.
And the other thing, actually, I think learnings, of which there were many, from our work up Nebel was that making sure that, so we had some examples where farmers like, yeah, I'll plant like 2,000 plants. So what we have typically found is that keeping a smaller number, doing a smaller number each year and just consistently is a much better, results in a much better outcome in terms of making sure that you can actually manage the ongoing kind of so it's a few practicalities.
Any further questions?
On with the recommendations.
Okay. Anyone second that, Nicole, please? Okay, further discussion. I'd just like to ask one question if I could, going back to the catchment groups, and that's a pretty impressive array there on the map, isn't it? Now, the groups of self-organised. Are you seeing, like I know what's happening in the Reedy catchment, that those Reedy groups are self-organising themselves, for example, and I think it looks to me like the start of self-management within the catchment. For instance, they get on a bus together and they go up and down the catchment. So they're starting to look outside of their area, but within the catchment. Are you seeing other catchments organising themselves with other groups?
Yeah, so certainly what we know about catchment groups is they have fallen off for somewhat, their own reasons with the group of people and the location that they're in. And certainly they're all in different stages in terms of what they're wanting to do, how they're operating, how self-functioning they are, what support they're requiring. And so, that's one of the things we've found is that you do need to have that one-on-one support to the group and be there and be available. But certainly, yes, we see groups in different levels of evolution, both in terms of their, connection with the broader community and the size of the group, but also some of the activities they're getting involved in. Yeah.
Well, that's very good. We've got that movement on the table, so I'd just say all those in favour. Yes, it's carried. Thanks very much, catchment team. Very good. We'll move to the next item, which is contracts and progress on the work. So we have Randall. We have Randall up there on the screen, don't we?
Yeah. Sandwich.
Yes.
Again, Randall and David and Paul can come to the table. Take it as read, but before these guys start, this is a stuff. It does give you an indication of the volume of work the catchment operations team get through. So just wanted to make that point that it's a pretty standard report, but if you get a sense of how much work's going out and about in the region. Over to you, Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll take the report as read and welcome any questions.
Any questions?
We're happy.
There's some good photos in there. Surely we've got a question there. Yeah.
I'll be the next. I think that's the next report.
That's the report. Yeah,
You've got an overlay.
at the table. Yeah.
Big number.
Okay.
And I'll explain the project. So how we go on with that process, I see there is a bit of an update there. So we've got 98 submissions, so we're going to a hearing.
I think you're in the. I think you're in the next item. We'll move this report and then we can.
I'm making a move that report.
Oh, second.
Oh, yes.
It's probably just around the monitoring of the banks. Is that done through satellite or is it all just visual? The only reason I ask is after that last flood, I've seen on our properties erosion that didn't even indicate what happened in the 2020 flood, and really random erosion and quite large erosion, which you would see in the satellite. Are we assessing after every flood? Are we doing that assessment and working all that stuff out? Because it was a bit of a shock.
Randall, have you got over?
Yep.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the priority after the current or the most recent flood has been on the stop banks and rock work. We do rely heavily on landowners to report erosion concerns and significant erosion that they want us to have a look at and address. And we've received a number of these. I think we're approximately 30 odd reports just for the Matera alone.
I guess, sorry, just to lead on from that, we'll, concerned about, say, communities, but there's also the discussion around, contaminants in water and soil and such like. Are we able to use technology and satellite to work out volumes of soil and gravel deposited into the river after floods?
Did you get that, Randall? That question?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I had a dog that was distracting me in the background, so I just shut the door.
Say again, John.
So I was just wondering if there is the opportunity to use some imagery, certainly going past quite regularly, to work out the volumes of soil and gravel that are being pretty much put into the river through a flood. You know, the volumes I've seen off our property are pretty significant, and I can't imagine a lot of us gone downstream that far, considering a fair chunk of it's quite heavy gravel. So I guess, does that help us? If we've got that information, it helps us work out where the gravel is landing, overlay on top of LiDAR to then work out how, or what we need to extract it, or our whole holistical approach to the river. Are we going to let it do its thing, or are we going to rock? What's going to be the best result for the water quality?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, that's a great question, and it's an ongoing issue, and it's part of a bigger challenge we've got in our three biggest catchments, Matera, Reti and Aparima. Definitely part of the analysis needs to be how the gravel is getting moved through our catchments, and the effect of that on creating or causing more erosion issues. So we've got a number of work streams that are currently looking pretty closely at this. We've got the bathymetric LiDAR, which is probably 98% complete for Matera, and we've got a work program for this summer to get the Reti and Aparima done. And it's all part of building that baseline data that we need to make those final recommendations back to council.
Okay.
Unity.
I would just say that's quite a good question. I feel is weaving together the ecological values, and when we talk about flood management too, and I assume both ends of the group are talking to each other on that. Okay. Any further questions?
Oh, on what John was saying, have we we've gone around and completed some works checking bridges and what's happened under bridges. I noticed that the Whitestone seems fine, but the Mararoa had an extreme lot of water under there, which was cutting back into that true right abutment, which was already cut into. My fear is that we need to make sure that we check them, because Waka Kotahi is not out there after a large major water event. Checking on our part, they are responsible for maintaining underneath them. We need to advise them if there's any changes. I think there's changes under the Mararoa.
Through you, just this morning, actually at Rosebush, we've got some issues there of in-cutting piece of the bridge, so we're going to try and get an on-site meeting to give you an example with Waka Kotahi, and go from there. But obviously technically they're their structures, but if we see something, then we will definitely advise them. I'm not sure it's their job to run around doing their inspections also.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can advise that we have worked with WSP, who are Waka Kotahi's contractors, I suppose you call them, and they have got a plan to address the gravel under the Mararoa Bridge. We're just not sure exactly when their contractors are going to be there. I believe it'll be South Roads or something like that. So,
Love it. Good. Thank you.
I need to follow up with Dr. Nichols, because we probably expect them to get on it sometimes.
Do you want? I can get it. I can have
But just to clarify that, Paul, that's as far as we can go as an advisement. Okay.
Yeah, they hold consents specifically for maintenance of their bridges, so it's up to them to They can authorise their contractors to go and do the work, or they can use their own contractors to carry out the work. They indicated to me that they would like their contractors to do the work. It's just a case of getting those contractors there.
Okay, that's very good. Look, if there's no further questions, oh, yes.
Just a comment on that one. First, they have the conversation. It makes sense for our guys to do the run of the river and take charge of that. And when it's something we build them, because it won't be with the district council, you've got NZ Rail, you've got a Waka Kotahi, who are allowed to do something within a few meters. It's not smart management. It's not done in a timely fashion. And I think it's a conversation that has to be had in Wellington. The mayor here is certainly open to it. Not everyone's joined up conversation targeting where they would normally grapple in the next 12 months. It was a really good example with Matara, where that island was reduced, it was used in the flood banks. If we're all working together in a joined up way and give them the right people with the right expertise,
You know, acknowledge it's quite a challenge with lots of parties with different views, varying views on the river. So, look, I just asked if someone would move that we recommend. It's all done. Oh, we've had a discussion.
Seconded by Gordon.
Oh, okay. All those in favour?
Aye.
Carried. Thanks very much. Move to the next slide. I think they just pulled us out because the next item's on the back page. There we go. Items here. Right. Randall, yeah, I notice you're not moving up there, David. Also, Randall, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll take the report as read, but there's a few key items I'd like to talk to as well in support of. Obviously, we had a fairly significant event in September. It was the largest event in Aparima, and we had a number of overtopping events and two breaches, one on the Aparima and one on the Upper Ariti. It's caused, created a lot of work that we're still trying to get on top of a normal BAU, and it is going to impact the annual program that we had planned in front of us for July.
Okay, thanks, Randall. Any commentary?
Sorry, I haven't finished. I've run out of technology up here, Councillor, so I'm just trying to manually work my way through the report.
All right.
So one of the other issues I want to talk about is on the Princhester on page 52, I think it is. We had a river's jumped out of its bank and it's come across the farmland, and it was sort of we had floodwaters around a couple of residential properties. We had to use or requested approval to use section 330 to address the risk to the vulnerable infrastructure there as a result of that flood, and putting that river back into its normal bed. We've included the flow data through the catchments. We'll skip through that. But on page 53, you'll see a photo of the Stopbank breach near Avondale on the Aparima River. It's approximately 100-metre long breach. And what you're seeing there is we're pulling that rockwork back, which is where the strip of the willows were, and we're pulling them back to that current erosion line. So that's our way of practically implementing the creating room for the rivers. So we're not trying to reclaim the land that was lost. We're pulling our flood structures back to that line that the rivers created.
Randall, what page was that? Page 28.
So I've quite helpfully got a different version of the report. So
53 line up.
53.
Yeah, and I did mention earlier that there was 2 agendas that were put out. So it's just
thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my agenda on page 54, we have a recently formed internal group called FIRST, which is a flood impact and risk specialist team. And I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce Joe Patterson, who's our flood risk project manager. And Joe's got some slides just to quickly show you what the team was doing in preparation to the event, as well as during the event, and then the work post-event.
Kia ora. Hopefully you can hear me, Randall. Is that coming through okay?
Yep.
So we formed the first group about a week prior to the September flood. First is, like Randall's mentioned, it's made up of specialists within Environment Southland. It's a partnership between Emergency Management Southland and Environment Southland to build our capability collectively to improve our flood intelligence and ultimately to improve the warning time for the community and our partner agencies. So yeah, a week prior, we were to kickstart this group, and then we set it up with kind of the bare bones concept in the September event. So FIRST stands for Flood Impact and Risk Specialist Team. As I've mentioned, it's a partnership and it's involving at the moment just internal staff like hydrology, the river engineering catchment operations team, GIS, etc. So everyone that plays a part in flood intelligence. So to give you an indication of what we did during this event, the first conversation around the weather outlook occurred on Thursday the 14th, the week prior, with the catchment team looking at the long range forecast and considering what sort of preparedness they needed to do, what sort of rostering they could put in place, and how long some of that preparedness work might take, such as fixing gates and making sure the drainage was in the best possible state it could be given the time, the warning time. Here's just a table to kind of show during each phase, the readiness prior to the event, prior to the rainfall and the flooding, response during the flood risk period on the ground, and then recovery post-flood, what we got up to. So initially when we formed the three of us to discuss this long range forecast, we also notified EMS and we caught up with hydrology. So we tried to kickstart the group and the intelligence flow as early as possible. We set up a field app in the heat of battle. Given we'd only had a week prior to set up, and we deployed it in the event to share photos during the flood to EMS and agencies and between each other to kind of monitor what it looked like on the ground in the smaller watersheds and how the other flood sources were playing out, like pluvial flooding, and how stormwater systems were coping. The flood mitigation part, so catchment operations role, was to get inspections underway, to understand vulnerabilities and to prepare as best as possible. And we set up liaison and support as much as we could with EMS and hydrology as well, to give technical advice and to assist with decision making. During response, we had pretty much all of the catchment operations team out in the field using the field application to collect photos and information about the flooding until the peaks were over, and then we kick-started our rapid impact assessment and flood mapping and collection of perishable data to improve our knowledge and to improve the data input into our modelling, like the Metoda and Arete Aparima models that we're working on now or will be soon. In response, we also liaised with the ECC. Paul Pollard was in the ECC supporting operations as well and creating that liaison role between FIRST and civil defence. And we also gave advice and support where we could to EMS and agencies where requested. In the post-event space, we worked with LINS to capture satellite imagery or to request that capture occurred where possible. And that was all based on timing of satellites passing. We managed to get radar imagery of flood extents and some good capture of some parts of the region and where it was flooding during certain times. And we continued to support civil defence with further intelligence on impact, including supporting MPI and the Rural Support Trust. So this is an example of the field app dashboard. Some of you may have seen this with EMS. So all of these photos were taken by the catchment operations team leading in, during and after the flood event using our field application that we created. And then it was put into this dashboard automatically and in real time. So when we were flying the helicopter, we'd take a photo and it would capture it in this. And it didn't require any further work to share this with key people. Here's a photo on the left from the helicopter, real time being captured into the dashboard for people to analyse. And I guess also to real time, we could direct the flight in other areas where we needed more information. So that was a good success story for a team that had just started. Post-event, during what's really important is gaining as much knowledge about that flood, no matter how big or small. It's really important to understand a historic flood and how it played out. So we had a few of our team go out with a consultant to collect high quality flood data for a day or so. And the rest of the time we were doing more broader mapping, drone imagery, heli imagery, and collating that satellite imagery and radar data. So really the whole purpose of FIRST and the priorities is to improve flood intelligence. So our priorities are to improve our historic understanding going forward, to improve our real-time intelligence and our network of people that can assist with that, including improving our connection with locals to draw information from them or images and that kind of thing in real time. To also set up sharing of photos and intelligence with partner agencies, such as the District Council, connecting them with the Quick Capture field application photos so they can also see it and use it with their need. And ultimately to improve the warning times for the community once we gain all that knowledge and insight. We're going to be working on better ways to collect flood extents and better ways to capture satellite imagery and analyse that amongst the flood data. And I guess going forward too, we're going to expand on our knowledge of a flow forecast spatially and what the worst case looks like, what the ideal looks like, and what is the most likely. So we're in a better position to communicate flood risk during the different phases of response. So that will all lead to some really good flood intelligence, and part of our peacetime work, which is quite involved, is the spatial intelligence of flood risk. So we're undertaking the hydrodynamic and hazard risk modelling for Mataura, Ariti, Aparima and Waia, and parts of Invercargill, fluvial and coastal flooding too. So that will help our flood intelligence understanding. So I'll just go to Randall. He may have more to add before we go to questions through the chair.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Good presentation. We'll, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, we'll save the questions to the end of the rest of the report. I would note a couple of key points is the flood peaks were a lot longer for this event than what we have experienced in the past. I believe we're still looking into that that post-event data, but in summary, no two floods are the same, so that's why it's important we learn as much from each individual flood as possible. Just on the Mataura Gravel Island, Councillor Horrell mentioned this earlier. There's two photos, one in July 2023 where work was underway, and then there's a almost post-completed work, September 2023. What we hadn't quite finished it, so we had hoped to pull the big rock off the front of the island and sort of de-armour it and then encourage the river to flow more directly across the island, but unfortunately we hadn't finished that, and it deposited about another metre of gravel on top of that island, so we've got some more work to undergo before we're happy to pull out of that operation. But in total, just over 40,000 tonne was extracted from that site and used in Ontario Street. We have a developing situation. It's been under monitor for some time, just behind the cool stores in the upper Mataura, just above where we're undertaking that current rock work on my page 56. I've got, with what you're seeing there is the little stars are just ongoing monitoring. So we've been monitoring it for the just over 10 months now as we've been watching that a secondary channel forming and starting to come along that hard true right edge, and it's chewing out the bank. So in that September event, there was about 7 meters of erosion in parts along that edge. I note that if we'd had similar erosion prior to completing the risk section downstream, that stomp bank would have been under very significant pressure, as there was only 3 or 4 meters left to the toe of the bank. And that picture there just shows in that active erosion line. What we're planning on doing there is beginning the conversations with key stakeholders, and hopefully establishing a consent to undertake either gravel extraction or gravel redistribution through that area. And also noting that that channel is causing erosion pressure on the true left side as well, immediately opposite that bank. Quick update on the Mataura modelling. We are in the final phases. We had to go and collect post-flood event data from locals. The staff undertook that door-to-door, and was very close to be able to show you the information that is going to show us for the future needs of those flood banks. There is a picture on page 58 of mine, which must be 25 of yours, I guess. It's an image showing bathymetric data. I've included that, councillors, just as an example of some of the imagery that we're starting to collect. What you're seeing there is a bathymetric visualization, and you can see the deep channels, and they are coinciding where erosion is occurring, and it will be supporting information for our work program going forward. And in summary, annual inspections were completed. We almost have to start again, unfortunately, but we're currently over 1,300 defects on the stop banks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome any questions.
Very good. Thank you very much, Randall and Joe, for that. Those presentations. Can I open up some questions from any of the committee?
My brain is frying.
There you go. Oh, yes. Nicole's got a question. You had a question, Nicole? Earlier?
Earlier I was talking
Morris.
I see the report there, there's not, on page 57 of my report, my document.
34.
That's, no, I don't really have a question about that. It'll go through the procedure of consent, and so we don't have it. I did have a question, sort of a general comment, I suppose. Randall, we were talking about pushing gravel from one side of the road to the other. A little bit concerned about that. I'm sure we know what we're doing, but we don't want to get back to the bad old days where we're pushing gravel around all the time.
Comment there, Randall.
Yep, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, councillor, for the question. I guess what that photo doesn't show is there's probably about 1.5 meters of gravel building up, certainly at that downstream end, and it is definitely putting pressure on that channel. So there's actually 2 channels being formed, both on the true left and the true right. We have, like I said, we have been monitoring it for quite some time, and we've also had our external people look at it. And the recommendation is, rather than relying on gravel extraction and pulling the gravel out, or alternatively, councillor, rock lining that erosion, as you can see there, is gravel redistribution to close off that secondary channel and encourage the river to transport and operate more effectively is probably the better solution rather than using rock at the moment. But we are within, probably 30 meters of a major urban stop bank as well. So it's probably a stitch in time, councillor, rather than waiting too much longer and then having to rely on hard engineering solutions for the situation, I believe.
Yeah, no, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate it as a difficult situation being in that urban area particularly. But if you cut off a channel like that, there's going to be fish in there, native fish and trout as well. So You might need to have some fish rescue teams out on site to too much loss of life. It's pretty hard to rescue them in those situations. I know I've done that before, but those are things to consider as well.
That's very good. Karen Randall, respond.
Noted, thank you. No, nothing further to add, but we, very early stages with key stakeholders in terms of discussions on what might be our recommended options for this situation.
Okay, that's very good. Any other questions or observations? I noticed, John, I'm going to put you on the spot. You got any observations living on the river about this last flood that came through? Just want to share this.
I've sort of already voiced my opinion with Paul and Randall. It was a very different flood this time. Like I said before, every flood's different. A lot more localised pressure down our way with just the amount of rain that we had on the Waimumu and another river. So down sort of below Matara, it didn't get to the 2020 levels, but gee, it was close. Like we're only talking post distance on our tide line down at our Bryden property. The river was very aggressive in coming up. I know people that lost stock. I almost got caught with 700 cows, and I thought it was 12 hours in front of the flood. So it even caught me out. And it didn't feel like there was a volume of water, but the height of the river certainly felt higher, and it just behaved different. It didn't back up tributaries of the river. It tended to cut across land and start its own river. That's where I got caught out. Even the neighbour, who'd been there not much longer than me, his comment was, I was amazed it blew through your property rather than backing up from me, how it normally does. And, I think it just shows how different the river is, and I think we just think our lucky stars Waikato didn't get the rainfall that was predicted, because it would have been a real mess.
Charge it. Yeah, very good. Morris.
Observations to ask people about comments on the river. I went fishing on over Meter River on the weekend and rode up from Mandible, and we drive up there and go through into the Whakanoes. And just through the gorge there, before the road, you come to the road that turns off back to Dodoma Park, there was not a lot, but maybe a half a dozen or so big plastic bales washed off the side where they were sitting, and now they're in the river. And there's a whole lot of plastic, like curtains festooned on the willow trees there. It wasn't a place where you would think the river might have got to, but because it was actually across the road on the other side, but it did. So now we've got that.
And I'll back that up. We've got bales of feed turn up on our property again, and I don't understand why we're not pressing this harder with the rural sector around storing feed in flood zones. It is not necessary, irresponsible, and I don't think we're seeing we're not being direct enough about it, because it's the aftermath is you can't get to these bales. It's bales since 2020 sitting in areas we can't reach with the machinery to get them, and it's just an eyesore, and you're inheriting somebody else's laziness, as far as I'm concerned.
Maybe that's a discussion or an item for the regulatory committee. About that bylaw that was established. Need to reaffirm that. Keep on doing that. So,
Chair, we have actually been, where we've been finding that, we have been actually, I've personally been ringing landowners and sending them letters about that kind of thing as well, and most of them have been pretty good. They didn't realise there was an issue around bylaw approval for that. So there is an education part to that, I guess. But yeah, we're definitely actively pursuing that where we can. Yeah.
well, yeah, I think it's a good idea that we get onto that, because baleage making season and then placing it's coming up, isn't it, through the Christmas period? Rightio. Could I have a mover for that report if everyone's happy?
Mr. Chairman, do you mind if I just add it to the question or the comments from both councillors? It's what Councillor Rodway and Pemberton both just said, really highlights the importance of getting that pre-flood event planning intelligence analysis work done correctly. We need to be providing our community with enough time so we're not losing stock and key, infrastructure or baleage down the rivers. I think it's symptomatic of us not getting the messaging right. And I know this flood event was significantly different to what happened versus what was forecast, but there's things that we can be doing to improving that advice for our communities earlier on.
Can I just add that this year, we've sent a letter out to every landowner, and it's within the where it has stop banks on their property within the floodway area, and we've put that in there about bailage. So we've mentioned on the radio as well. So yeah, we've made a concerted effort to try and get that information out there.
I guess it's like any program, you front load it with education, but then at a point you have to actually do something concrete about it. So thanks very much. We have to receive that report, we have a mover. Have we got a seconder? John, all those in favour? Against? It's carried. Thanks very much. Guys, are you going to remain in the seat? Yep. We're going to go to the next item, which is item 4, rating and district works program. Randall, again, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll take the report as read. I know we've chewed up a fair bit of time on that last item, so maybe just go to any questions for any specific items or activities councillors wish to discuss.
Yeah, and just gives you a glance of the work that is undertaken across the region, across the different catchments. So another standard report that we bring at a regular intervals. Contains an awful lot of detail, but it's a standard report, but again reflects the amount of work that goes often around in the region.
So,
yes.
So with regards to works on the Upakarara River, we've got some steel project regarding the findings of the road just below on the tree right back bridge. Maybe coming and fix that also the high workload on parts. If they're fully grown, we're just not going to go through there. It's going to be issues in the future. Not sure the design of that is it included proper catchment ideas with allowing the women to maybe some of that work had some constriction, pointing it to through left, which is what we don't want. And looking at the work you've got here, you're already track 500 metres downstream of the highway bridge. So we're doing extra works to protect something because it's a secondary result of someone doing something poorly or possibly without knowledge.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Field and Trails Trust did actually apply for a bylaw approval to carry out that work down the planting out there, not the section you're talking about, unfortunately. So we've got to evaluate that and decide whether it's actually an issue. We have to request that they remove that section. The understanding was that they were to plant towards the north there. That she granted bylaw approval. Running strong investigation into those areas to the north of the
So with that secondary, can I ask, do you believe it will become a future issue with their plants to the right?
I don't know what sort of trees they have, whether they're low shrubs or something like that. Probably not. I think I personally think that the willows on the tree left bank are a bigger issue down here. We start to get to the point where it starts to use by that. They probably need to probably comes a capacity issue through there between that flood bank on the left side that runs out past the sewage ponds. Yeah, I can't believe it is at this stage, but you were just had time to get around there and look at all this stuff.
Can I suggest, Paul, if you can formally respond, once you've done your inspection, if you could formally respond, that'd be really good. Thank you.
Very good. Lynn?
Thanks,
And
Jim. Just a comment rather than a quick thing, if I'm right. Given that rates notices have just appeared in mailboxes or inboxes, and lots of my constituents are saying, "Oh, what do you do for me? Why do I have to pay that one?" The items on pages 36, 37, relating to the Invercargill City flood scheme, some of those items are things that could perhaps be brought to constituents' attention as the work that we do for them. Keep them safe. Thanks.
I think that's a really good idea, and the future work that we're going to be doing too. Morris?
I'd just like to read the report, acceptance of the report, Mr. Chairman. It's very detailed. There's a lot of really good information in there, which is usual for these reports from the Catchment Division. So I'd like to thank them for all the hard work they've done.
Yeah.
It's very good.
Yeah, no, look, I would back that up. It's becoming a really intense part of the business, isn't it? So, I'd also just like to say there's still a lot of defects of animal damage. And I see that in there, and look, really good putting those coloured pie graphs in it. Sort of a councillor can understand that sort of stuff quite easily. So that's good for me. But yeah, it still surprises me, the size of that pie, that slice. Babe, you want?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, it's obviously we've got a big educational program around there. I guess we're getting to the stage where we're dealing with repeat offenders, for want of a better word, and then we need to decide how we're going to deal with that. There's a lot of issues around it. Share milkers, managers don't get the message. There's a whole range of things, variables in it, but ultimately they are damaging the bank through the grazing. So yeah, we probably need to look at how we're going to address that.
Would that be a lot? Yeah, would that be a lot to do with crossings? Most of those defects, animal defects, be classed as crossings of the bank for stock.
There's a whole lot of things in it. Like a lot of the rural banks were originally set up with a fence down the middle, and those sheep in those days. I mean, when I lived in Belfast, I don't even remember a cow. So, but so I'm not picking on cows, but they are a heavier animal, and mind you, I've seen sheep make a mess of the bank as well. So, a lot of it comes down to management, short duration, all that kind of thing, on off, because we actually want them to graze it. This is the point. We can't afford to mow it. We don't have that money to do that or capability. So we actually want them to graze it, but very carefully. At the right time of year, short on-off duration, not unrestricted access onto the banks. And that's the challenge, to get guys to run a wire along the toe. We've got one situation on the Waikai that we've got to deal with the landowner up there with 60 defects. It's going on and on. Now we're at a point where we've got to decide what type of action we're going to take to get compliance there. So
yep.
It's an unbelievably big workload. I've spent 8 years in compliance, and the workload in this department is just unbelievable. So you can just spend hours and hours on this stuff.
It's important to know we've got a framework to manage that. So
yeah,
that's assurance.
It's a really important piece of work, and yeah. So look, if there's any other questions there, look, we've got a recommendation. We've got 3 recommendations to receive and note. I just want to move them all as one, if I could.
Well, I thought I'd already moved it, Mr. Chairman.
You did. Lyndall, okay, that's good. All those in favour? Yes, it's very. Thanks very much. We've got a new team. Ellie, come up again. Item 5, biosecurity and biodiversity operational report. Ellie, if you look, what is yours?
So through you, Mr. Chair, I'd say that can we take the item as read, and then happy to answer any questions so we can focus on the other biosecurity reports, but happy to answer any questions.
Very good. That's reasonably straightforward. What have we got, team?
This is item 5.
This is item 5.
I'm currently working through the tool regarding the issues regarding possum numbers and everything else. It is a concern. It has been a concern by constituents.
Excuse me, that's possum numbers. Yep.
I'll just tell you, we giggle at the 2 reported wallabies both were identified as possums. I know our possums are getting big, but it's been mistaken for wallabies getting quite dangerous.
Well, I know it was wet in the flood, so it looked very well.
Okay. So it's but yeah, possum numbers and the emergence of TB in the area, we really need to be concerned with that. Make an effort.
Like the TB board.
Clarification, Chair, when you're saying TB in the area, which area?
And Fiordland in Tiana Basin.
Is TB there now?
No, but there was possums.
Yeah, okay.
There are increased possums. And the one thing I do find myself doing every time I drive the road is count the amount of dead possums. It does seem to be increasing. Some days might be 2, some days might be 5.
Through you, Chair, and Ali can speak to it. We have a possum related workshop coming up. So that will maybe, in more detail do that. So that's good to know.
Yeah.
Further questions? Thanks for that, Paul. Any other questions here?
Yeah, you mentioned about the Tiana boat show and clean, wash, dry, or whatever the Didymosphenium regime is. Well, what's happening? Is it contained now, or are we still finding more of it? And the river that's on the west side of Lake Tiana, are they still clear, or you don't?
So through you, Chair, Didymo is managed by MPI, so I don't have the full update details, but as far as I know, there are still some catchments that are clear of it, but it's still something that can transfer very, very easily, and so that check, clean, dry message is so important.
Yeah. Thank you. Sure. Further questions?
I'll move the report.
Thank you very much. We're going to see you.
I'll second that.
All those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you, Ellie. And colleagues coming up. Next item. Hello, welcome, Polly. So Southland Fish Passage Project update. This is item 6.
We do have a quick presentation. We are very aware of time, so we will not.
No, makes as long as it takes.
But yeah, this is obviously one of the projects that we're funded through Jobs for Nature by MFE. And a lot of interest around this table on the details of it. So Polly's just going to come and run you through a bit of where we're at with the project so far.
Southland Fish Passage project. So we're currently in financial year 4 of the project. So we're getting close to ending our funding. So keep in mind we need to figure out what we do next, which will be great. So what's been achieved so far? We've done more than 1,900 surveys. So at the start of the project, we predicted we would do 800. We set a target for the 5 years of 800, and we exceeded that in the first year. But it's a sort of a good news, bad news story. So it's bad news for me because we do a lot of surveys, but we don't find a lot of fixes. Good news for the fish because there's not a lot of things to fix. So that map just shows you all the data we have, where we're going and what we're looking at. So far, this figure will differ to what's in the report. I think the report said 150, but our team have been out and done a couple more, so I threw those in there as well. So we've remediated 152 barriers, and the little pink stars up there show you where the teams have been out doing that. So we have a team of contractors, as two staff locally who are employed by a contractor based in the North Island, but the staff are based here, and that's where they've been going out. And I just thought I would show you some of what these look like. So when they go out, we have a culvert here, and on the after side over here, we've got a rubber ramp and some ropes going through it. So that helps slow the water down and gives the fish something to climb up. This is a different kind of rubber ramp. So you can see over here, we've got some sort of natural rocks and things, but there's just not enough to get from the rocks to the culvert here. So we've got some rope for them to grip onto and a rubber ramp, and inside the culvert there's some little what we call baffles. So these are more solid plastic, but they do flex over, so they like bend over if they get too much water on them. In that respect. This is another culvert that's been done. So this is a box culvert, and again you can see those baffles. So the baffles are important to be offset so that they create pools and riffles. And native fish aren't the best at swimming, so they swim in bursts, and when the water's coming too fast at them, they can't swim up it. So we create these little pools so they can sit behind the baffles and rest, and then they can make another dive for the next bit and so forth, and hopefully get up. Great. This is a different kind of repeat completely. So this is quite a unique one where there's like a sort of concrete kind of apron, and there was some natural waterfall, small waterfall, but not big waterfalls in front of it, some rock. And so the company have put a barrier across, you can see that. So it will help direct the fish up this part where the water wasn't moving as fast, and give them a nice pool here so it's slowly moving down. Just gives them a little bit of room to get around. We also have been supporting a PhD student. So a PhD student has a couple more years to go. And I thought I'd give you an update on what Ryan's been up to. So this is a picture of Ryan over here with a giant cockapoo, and this is him doing some work. So he's doing electric fishing and lots of eDNA samples. So the objective of his study is to test the effectiveness of our fish passage remediation. So at the moment, under the National Fish Passage Guidelines, the work we're doing is considered novel. So this is the work that everybody does everywhere across the country for fish passage. The contractor we're using is the main contractor that anybody uses if you want fish passage done. But the advisory group consider it novel. So we've got this PhD project going so that we can overcome that with some real science. So it's a long-term monitoring program. So far he's surveyed 32 barriers, so that's before and after. So he goes in, surveys them before, finds out what fish are there, takes eDNA samples, and then we'll go back after we've remediated them. So he's done 47 field days, lots of fish have been caught, 16 different species identified. Of most interest from his work so far is that we have some databases that tell us where we think these fish should be and where DOC think they should be. And he's finding a lot of fish where a lot of species where we didn't think they would be, and a lot of things where are not there where we thought they would be. So that's kind of interesting in terms of non-migratory fish. So we've adjusted the program based on that early feedback and come down lower to the coast so we can stay right away from those non-migratory fish. And he recently was over in the States and presented his work at a workshop in the States. That's fish.
You just want clean, John. Oh, you finished?
Yeah, that's fish.
Thanks for that, Polly. Question from John.
Yeah, so to clarify your last comment there, so what you're saying is we are not creating risk of introducing competitive fish. They shouldn't be like.
Yes, we're doing our best to protect the non-migratory fish, which are more endangered than the migratory fish. So we've worked with DOC, so we set a whole bunch of sites off to DOC and asked them to assess those and come back to us with the data they have. And we've used all the databases that they have. But in general, the fish databases are limited and people haven't been gathering information. So the work that Ryan's doing is really inputting into that database as well, and the work that we'll continue to do.
Here.
Yeah, I'm guessing that they're principally galaxids that you're working with.
Yes.
And so are there issues other than fish passage that we should be looking at? You've just focused on the fish passages. Have we, in the 16 odd species you've identified, some that are at real risk that we should be doing more than just assuring the fish passage?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, long term, definitely. I mean, we can get the fish moving around, but there's no it's not going to be that successful, there's no habitat to go to. So yeah, getting streamside habitat is my stuff, but that's further down.
We're doing a lot of this work for all the native fish. Is there any input from the Department of Conservation on assisting the native fisheries?
And
Assisting with all your work for fish passages and everything else. There's obviously a benefit to the Department of Conservation as well, and to the environment, including yourselves.
yes, we can share the data with them. And the technical people have provided advice on the location of where they think fish are, and provided us advice based on the data we had as to whether they felt we could go ahead with remediations in certain areas.
Because the whole idea of fish passes is to expand the area of where they live.
Yeah.
So the idea is that we're helping our native species expand the area. So you would think ultimately the Department of Conservation would be able to assist financially in some way.
Well, you would think there, but of course, this work, as I understand, is driven off the national policy statement, isn't it?
Right, so, yeah, it is, but this is through Jobs for Nature MFE funding, so the only reason we've got funding at this level for this project is because of the carbon economic response.
Yeah, and as you
And
were
yeah,
saying.
and this ends in June 2025.
All the good work we've done and possible future input of investment. Yes, sir.
Very good question. Any other questions?
Move the recommendations, Jim.
That's very good. We've got a seconder there.
Second, good.
All those in favour? Against? It's carried. Thanks very much for that. So, move to the next one. Gosh, we're getting through. I think we're on number 7.
Or we can slow you down on number 8.
Well, you're very organised. I like how you're not jumping up and down. In fact, you will line a few items up. I don't know who organises that, but it's well done.
It's on the same one. Yeah.
It's not my credit for that.
It's you, Jim.
Right. So we'll go to item 7. Biodiversity action on the ground update. Holly.
I've got another set of slides for you for this, so.
Beauty.
The biodiversity action on the ground project covers 3 main work streams. We've got the team who are in the back here doing management plans and working with landowners to help them understand how to manage their land. We've got environmental enhancement funds, and we've got ecological surveys are our main 3 streams of work. And today I just felt it would be good to focus in on the environmental enhancement fund. I think that's the one that we get the most questions about rather than the whole project, because otherwise it's just a lot of numbers and it's a little bit boring. So the pie chart shows you the number of applications we had this year. So we had 57 applications, and to put that into context, based on the previous data, when ES had 1 biodiversity officer and a much smaller budget, they processed about 7 applications, 7 to 10 applications a year. So my team is processing a lot more than that, with 57 received this year. We approved 46 of those, and the big red one is approved. We declined 8 of them because they didn't meet our criteria. So the criteria is really focused on existing Indigenous biodiversity values. And 3, during the process of being assessed, the applicants chose to withdraw them while they were working with the team on refining them to better align with the criteria. So that's the numbers. The dollars, so you can see the little graph over the little side here is ES's contribution. So it's just under 600,000. The big side over here is what the applicants are contributing. So in total, the total value of projects is about $1.7 million worth of work out there happening, and we contribute just under 600,000 to that this year. So it's really showing how much we can ramp up work out in the community with a bit of financial support. Again, another little graph just to give you an indicator that we're covering off a large number of habitat types. So the most common one is probably forest remnants over here. We won't go through those in great detail, but just to let you know, we are looking at as many different habitats as we can. This is a summary of the work. So this is a GIS database that our team internally set up, and I can't thank them enough for setting this up. The way that this records my team in the field and put stuff into the into field maps. And then I get this dashboard, which has increased the level of confidence that MFE have in our reporting significantly, and they just have stopped asking us questions. So it's great to have this, and it's at my fingertips. It's updated as soon as the team have signed something off and they've updated this in here, I can see it straight away. So the numbers are big. So you can see in our planting program, we've got 22,400 plants going into other areas that aren't riparian areas, and we've got 6,300. So we go for lots of plants. We don't shy off from putting them in the ground. And what you can't see over here is this little graph here, which shows you the number of people hours. So just to put it into context, people out there, the number of hours they're doing on their properties, working to get all this done, equates to approximately 12 FTEs. So we've got a lot happening and a lot of people involved, which is great. And then I thought you would like to see some examples of what is out there. The next few slides are just photos. So this is in the Areti catchment. This is on a sheep and beef farm. We've got some fantastic kowhai trees that are being protected. Keep losing my things here. So fantastic kowhai trees. This is landowner, and she's growing and got their own nursery on site, and we've done some fencing with them at this site as well to protect another area. This one is in the YL catchment. So this is the TYL Kai Trust at the Jericho Stream Valley, the Takatimu Mountains. So we're supporting them with a lot of native plantings. This is one of the few sites where we're doing supporting a project with large scale restoration planting. So generally that doesn't qualify for our project, but this area is so connected, it's filling in the gaps of other Indigenous existing vegetation, which is great. This one is in the Areti catchment. This is a regenerating forest and tussock. So they're working on trying to protect it from deer, and they're looking towards large scale deer control and pig control. So pigs are definitely an emerging issue. This one is again in the Areti catchment in the Drummond area. So we've got a lovely wire rush bog over here. This is what we think of when you guys say let's fill wetlands, lovely little wetland areas. And landowner who's working at doing pest control in that area. Again, the Areti catchment, this is in Grove Bush. Again, we've got a lovely wire rush bog. And they're working on weed control and animal control in the area. And this one here is a completed project. So the team have been really good at encouraging people to get in and get their invoices into us as soon as they've got work on the ground. We found last year that people thought because there was a closing date for the payment, they had to wait to that date. So we've been working really hard to encourage them to get your work done, just get in touch and get us out there. So this is one of our sites where we've had lovely fence put up. So I think you would have seen from the stats, I think we've planned on about 22 kilometres of fencing. So it's pretty significant happening out and about. And our last one is in the Matara catchment. And this one again is completed. And again, another lovely fence here protecting these beautiful forest remnant. That's it.
In the Warrakiki area or somewhere, isn't
I don't know the exact areas.
Thanks for that, Paul. Got a few questions surrounding that.
That's very good. I'll move.
Okay. Let's have a wee discussion about that. I'd just like to say that what the future beyond with the funding going, the Jobs for Nature funding, that will be a further discussion. What I see and what I witness is that you start people off doing little areas like that, becomes quite infectious, and then you go back and you see that they've just done a few more on their own. So I think it's well worth been a really good project. So I just want to make a comment on that.
Yeah, we're actually already seeing adjoining landowners starting to get encouraged, and that snowball effect in certain areas where the team have been working with people. Just having a team of people to be able to regularly contact people and encourage them and support them is critical to keep that momentum going.
It would be interesting to see some of the earliest projects embarked on now. To see what.
Well, that's a good point, isn't it? Do you revisit some of these areas and just to see how they're going with their ongoing maintenance?
Yeah, a good number of our applications are repeats, so they've got large properties and they're doing staged work, so the team are back out on them, but that's definitely something we can follow up.
Just, you know, out of interest,
Really advised to see
given that
how
we councillors used to approve some of that funding early on, it'd be really interesting to see the impact it's had. The ongoing impact.
Thanks, Lyndall. Morris.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I should have said earlier, but our project in Ototara at the end of Reggie Road, we were restoring topaz forests, is one of these successful ones. And you were asking about follow up and all that sort of thing. And I can say that, you know, the staff are really good at keeping in touch and, you know, making sure everything's done and helping us where we need to do stuff.
Thanks very much, Polly. I'll let you go now. We've got a mover and we've got a seconder already. So that all those in favour of noting that report. Against. It's carried. So now we're moving on to item 8. And just before we get into it, I'd just like to say, thank you, Catherine. Just like to say that it's quite a significant report, isn't it? The end of the line report, you could say, isn't it? And what an effect it's had, those 2 large projects during that really difficult time of COVID. What were we going to do? And what's it's, you know, I guess you've all read this item here, but some of the outputs on it and the opportunities it's actually given people, it's quite significant. So really pleased. Yeah. So Caroline, Ellie.
Thank you. So yeah, we've just finished these 2 really big projects, so we thought it'd be a really good time to celebrate. When we look back to 2020, and our marine program was one of the very first things that suffered because of COVID in New Zealand, because the cruise ships were the first thing that went. So it was pretty obvious from a very early stage that we were going to have a major financial issue with COVID happening. And then obviously Fiordland and Fiano, which is a major part of our region, relies on tourism. So it was pretty obvious. And so I think right back at the start of talking to Doc and we're like, wouldn't it be great if we could do some jobs for nature type projects? At the time, I wasn't quite sure how much work they were going to take. They've definitely been hard. They've definitely been complicated. They definitely stretched us, but both of these ones have built on existing projects. Both of these ones, I think, have delivered real value, not just for the community, but also for the environment. So we do just want to take a bit of a time to celebrate them and also go, phew, it's over. So it's like it's the DOC bit of Jobs for Nature. So the intent was to revitalise communities through nature-based employment and stimulate the economy post-COVID-19. It wasn't post-COVID-19, it was during COVID-19. We were lucky enough to get 2 grants as part of the DOC fund, and both of those grants came through. We had a Fiordland working group, like an alliance set up with affected people in Fiordland, with Southland District, with Department of Conservation, with community, with all sorts of people going, how do we make this happen? What are the platforms that we could come forward? The weed control one, we started as a little project as wouldn't it be great if we can just do it with weed control, and then the community kept putting all these extra ideas of can we include Pia Tahi and can we include Ivor Wilson Park? And I went, yeah, of course we can. So I was really sorry to my team for doing that, but it's worth it in the end. So that got a lot bigger because of what the community asked for. And then the second one is the Andaria one, which you all know is an existing project. Doesn't fit quite so neatly into the intent of Jobs for Nature because of the level of training required for our diving. Like it's actually highly trained work. It's not just any work. So DOC took a real risk honours funding through Jobs for Nature. We're really, really grateful to them. I would like to say that this has been really well supported from across council. So you guys get to see me talking about this all the time, and the team leaders come and talk to it, but this has been supported by our IT team, our finance team, our comms team. Brittany joined us purely for this project, and it's been absolutely brilliant having it. The Harbour Masters team, like this has been across council effort. I can't thank everyone up enough, and I'm not going to promise them I'm not going to come up with any more dumb ideas, because I probably don't. But they are both not finished. So I'm going to let Catherine talk about the successes of Andaria. I'm then going to do the weed control, because unfortunately Jolie's away dealing well in conifers, but it should be her talking about it, because it's her that's done most of it. Thanks, Ellie. Yeah, so Fiordland Andaria Control. So this is a project that has been running for about 13 years when we first found Andaria and Breaksea Sound. So yeah, the Jobs for Nature was $2 million across 2 years, with the purpose of doing a really intense biomass removal effort to try and get on top of it and work, towards that progressive containment goal. As you'll see by the attached report, I could talk all day on this. It was a massive project and there was so much happened. But yeah, I'll just try and keep it high level today and just focus on some of the key outcomes and achievements. So first of all, we'll touch on employment. We started off with a goal of 36 full-time equivalent staff members for this project. That got revised really early on down to 26 because we realised straight off the bat that the COVID-19 lockdowns were going to severely impact our ability to train the staff and get that one off the ground. So in the end, we actually got very close to meeting our FTE target. So 24.1 was the total across the 2 years. We'll go into a little bit next about all of the issues we kind of came across. Some of them were unanticipated, some you could sort of predict might have happened, but yeah, we're really proud of the team in terms of how hard they work and the massive hours they worked across a raft of different activities to meet that goal. So first of all, just to point out that a lot of ES hours went into this project that can't actually be counted in the Department of Conservation figures. So you'll see just Ellie and myself at the top of that wee table. Plus we had a number of ES snorkelers that we trained up to help out with the project when we were particularly short on divers. So some of the work we were able to supplement with snorkeling, so mainly it was scuba diving, but it was really cool that we had teams that were able to contribute. So roughly about an FTE we reckon was contributed in-house, which is a lot of work and like Ellie said, unanticipated. Some of the major hurdles we faced through the program, we estimate that we probably lost about 2 FTEs across the whole thing, just with a whole heap of issues that came up that we didn't anticipate. There's a lot of detail into the reasons for lost time in the report, but I'll just go over a few high level things so you get an understanding of what we were grappling with. We use 2 main vessel operators. So the Department of Conservation have a vessel called the Southern Winds. So in terms of using the Southern Winds, they obviously had some really major rat incursions and things they were dealing with in field and throughout. So when we had bookings with them, they essentially took the vessel away for a massive chunk of time while they were dealing with their own issues. There were also a ridiculous number of breakdowns and crew staffing issues, which meant that we didn't get out on trips for as long as what we had kind of budgeted on. In terms of awesome charters, we had quite a serious illness with one of the crew members, so we lost hours there for a couple of weeks where that person didn't get replaced. On the Jobs for Nature side of things, there were a lot of staffing issues, and these were things that we never sort of saw coming. So staff losses due to vaccine mandates was one that you just couldn't predict. So we lost a few team members in the first year because of that. Injuries, illness. So if we had a team member down on the day that the trip was going to leave, we lost them for a whole week because you can't send a sick or an ill person on a boat for a week. So, we'd be expecting big hours from one team member, you'd just lose them for weeks at a time if they had COVID. There were really strict regulations around COVID in terms of what you were allowed to do and when you could go back to scuba diving as well. So that was a massive hurdle. Weather stand downs, an obvious one in Fiordland, but if we had anticipated working long days, and across the summer, and then we had bad weather come through, the team just got paid for a minimum hour while they were on stand down. So we did lose a lot of hours around there too. So essentially the take home message from this point is that if you contribute, add in everything else that was contributed and look at all the losses, we did a brilliant job getting we did with the employment targets. Training. So a key objective, as Ellie mentioned, was to recruit and train workers that were affected or displaced by COVID in the Te Anau and surrounding communities. This meant that most of the divers recruited for the program had no prior dive experience, and we had to train them from zero up to scientific diver standard. This is just a quick graphic showing the different components to become a scientific diver. So months of dive specific training took place before we could even get them in the water. And then just that bottom line shows the raft of other training that we contributed to upskill them and, you know, just get them understanding the broader context and working for environment outcome. So 15 divers recruited in total and trained, and then we had 13 full-time divers each year. Another primary goal of the project was to support local Te Anau and Southland businesses as much as we could. We estimated approximately 3,600 hours of work provided to local Southland businesses across the project, and about 1,600 hours from COVID affected contractors across New Zealand. So the likes of the two dive providers there, Descend, based out of Te Anau, Milford Sound, and Waiheke, they sort of said to us that we literally kept their businesses afloat across those lockdown periods. So really cool that we were able to do that as part of the program as well.
How did you get Black Dog Group? It's the name of the bar, but.
Oh, different. Don't worry, me to consultant. Yeah, so services of all things there. So before we go over the environmental outcomes, just a quick overview of how we did it. So all of the diving was preceded with monitoring. So we did a lot of surveys underwater just to see what was what and where everything was at. The divers would handpick the area, they bagged it in catch bags, and then we stored it in bins contained on our large vessels. We had approval to dispose of the area and Fiordland National Park. So you'll see attached to the report, I believe there's a whole separate report around that disposal site if you're interested. And top right photo there is just a part of the gear cleaning and sanitizing process. So that's all about divers decontaminating so that they're not transporting spores and things around the water, which is about every dive. Conservation outcomes. Biomass removal first. So in year one, as you might remember from last year, we had about 30 tonne of Undaria biomass removed across the 303 removal dives. That was all in the Breaks of Sound area. Year two, we started off with a hiss and a roar, and within the first few weeks, we had 14,000 kgs of Undaria removed across 160 removal dives. However, you will remember that within the first month, we then discovered that we had a new Undaria incursion down in Dusky Sound, which meant that we had a complete program shift in order to figure out how we would best to respond to the Dusky Sound incursion and place our resources before we got too far. So our initial move down there was to survey, complete the limiting survey and survey the extent in Duck Cove. We found it across a couple of kilometres, as you'll see there on the map, and we also found it at a small number of outlying sites around Dusky Sound as well. We then moved into a wider survey across Fiordland because we wanted to figure out were there any other populations that would miss before we throw heavy resources into responding to get another Undaria incursion. So this slide is super cool because it just shows how far we actually got when we did our wider surveillance effort. So 4 months of surveillance wrapped up the Jobs for Nature project. The team swam 160 kilometres of coastline in Fiordland across 320 dives. The priority was to survey high-risk sites and target the structures and main anchorage areas where the boats would be moving around. 101 structures were inspected, and the yellow line there shows just how far we got. This was a unprecedented effort. Nobody's ever surveyed this, far and wide in Fiordland, and it's given us some amazing data to help plan what we're actually going to do next. The awesome thing was there was no new marine pests found and no further Undaria incursions. So we know what we're dealing with now, and that'll help us, plan what we do next. Wider program benefits. So throughout the 2 years, the team contributed to a heap of other stuff that was linked to this project. We helped the Department of Conservation lead, it's co-funded by the three agencies, but DOC lead the containment work. So that's a program that's been going for a long time now, and we do monthly surveys. So we had divers on those trips every month. They helped us with the joint agency and ES compliance trips in Fiordland. We assisted ETI with the Underia Tool Development Project that was happening in the Breaks Centre as well. And they also helped us really effectively respond to the 2 Rapiota incursions that we had last year. So you'll remember Dudendum and Bexlin, and then we had an incursion down at Easy Harbour as well. So it just meant that we were able to respond really rapidly because we had this awesome trained crew of experienced divers. Other kind of unintended benefits and contributions that we sort of just happened along the way. Some of these are really cool, and I didn't end up knowing about these until right at the very end. We helped a lot of researchers along the way. So the acoustic monitoring in Fiordland, there's some university projects happening that we housed divers and helped do some gear maintenance and things. Shark research, the eBird survey one I think was really neat, and that's one of the ones I didn't know about until the very end. So when we were doing the surveillance, just as we were tripping around in Fiordland, one of the team members was an avid bird watcher, and he actually submitted hundreds of eBird checklists to the National Bird Atlas. And so now they've got this incredible, range of data and bird sightings in a part of the country that's really data deficient in that area. So just awesome that we contribute to stuff like that along the way.
Fantastic.
A lot of publicity from this project, as hopefully you will have seen. We did 2 One News interviews, and then there was just a raft of radio interviews, media releases, newsletters, magazines, social media posts, and all that. So that's just a quick graphic to show you some of the main headlines. There's a really odd one up there at the top that sort of cropped up fairly recently about, you'll remember the sunfish sighting that the team were on the news about? Yeah. So there was some random item over in Europe that reported our divers being dwarfed by and terrified by a massive sunfish. So that was kind of entertaining. Just what's next for us. So that map on the right shows what we're now dealing with in terms of Underia and Fiordland. We've obviously got the main population up in Breaksea Sound, plus the new Duck Cove one. that we read dots just so some of the outlying sites that we need to continue monitoring where we've found 1 or 2 plants just in that wider surveying. Down at the bottom there in Chalky Inlet, that's a location where we've successfully eradicated Underia. So we're still doing some follow-up checks, but that's a really cool site and example of how if you find these things early and you get on top of them, you can actually get rid of it. We have $500,000 allocated through the ES annual plan process to carry on some of this work in the coming 12 months. This financial year. Our goal is to increase our compliance, continue the surveillance across Fiordland and Rapiota, as well as in the meantime try and continue the progressive containment goal. So containing Underia back to Breaksea Sound, that's still what we're working towards at this stage. A big part of that is working with our partner agencies to determine what all 3 of us want to do, what our goals are longer term. So that's those discussions are underway at the moment as well. And one other major thing that we've taken on this year is the Fiordland bound vessel contract. So this used to be managed by MPI and that is now being passed over to ES to run. So that should hopefully be commencing in the next few weeks, and that's just looking at all of the boats in Stewart Island and Bluff that are usually bound for Fiordland and checking them to make sure that they're in rankings before they get away. So that's all from me. I don't know if you had any questions or comments.
Yes, there's questions. I'm sure there'll be some questions here.
Yeah, the Dusky Sound one, can you win that? Or is it just a case of taking out biomass each year and trying to restrict its spread, or what's likely to be the outcome there?
It's really hard to say. You could certainly win it if you throw a lot of money at it. At the moment, we are dealing with limited funding for this next financial year. So we will be doing monthly biomass removal trips to try and reduce the population again and get on top of it before things, get to a reproductive age and continue spreading. But it's one of those things that will be significantly, determined by how much funding we can get and what the other agencies are willing to contribute to it. It's probably a point. So we cannot eradicate Underia from Fiordland. I think that's to be realistic. It is always going to be in Fiordland, but if we can contain it to the Dusky Breaksea complex and protect all of the other fjords, that is a massive win. So it seems like it's jumped us a couple of times and we keep going, oh, the area is getting bigger, but it's actually still on a Fiordland scale, it's actually still quite contained. So We won't eradicate it, but we should be able to hold it.
So before the project, did you know the stuff of what you could and couldn't do? So is that one of the biggest things of the project, is understanding what's achievable and what isn't? You've got a good handle on that now.
Yeah, and we've learned how actually with scuba dives in the water, you can make huge gains just hand moving the stuff. Yeah, if you've got a full team working in there for, a week at a time. It wasn't thought that the amount that was in Breaksea just wasn't achievable. There's no way you could take that out. So taking that 30 ton out in that first year, because that's that proof of concept that this can be done if you have the divers sometimes.
But you got a wee follow up here.
Yeah, well, so biocontrol, do Kinner and Power eat it, and can we just catch some of them and dump them in there and feed them in and say get stuck in, guys? Or is there something that can be done that's a wee bit outside the box here?
Kinner were used in Sunday Cove in the original Sunday Cove incursion, and I understand they did scour the area quite well, but that just opened it up for more into area to then come. So it works at a small scale, and the amount of effort to get the Kinner there was quite huge. One of the reasons we supported the MPI tools project was to try and find other ways of doing this. Is there a way of using suction jet or something else? But time and time it comes back to the most effective technology we currently have is divers.
So Paul, John, and then Linda.
Cool, thank you. With regards to the Southern Winds, the Department of Conservation boat, are they contracting? Are we paying for the use or help or assistance in that boat? Because I do remember when that was first put out onto the coast, it was meant to be a multi funded from different parties boat that slowly ended up that Dock is the only one that puts money towards it. And I always thought it would be good if we, Environment Southland, because of the coastal situation we've got, and put more money into it to become once again a shared vessel because of all the work that you guys are doing. Or do we just pay the contract rate and it costs a fortune? Or do they do it free?
Well, they don't do it for free, but it is significantly cheaper to use Southern Winds than the contract vessels. Yeah. So there's certain, not discounts, but there's things that you don't pay for that you would.
And I know it's not really your place to answer with regards to funding and PS and becoming a shared asset, but it would be good in a perfect world.
I believe that conversation is happening.
Good, thank you. Oh, don't need to go on anymore. Thankful.
Just keen to ensure that we've got an Undaria program. And obviously that'll be another conversation for the MTP of the councils, but notwithstanding that, any efficiencies that you can strive with other organisations makes sense. So we'll just continue to look at that.
I agree. Thank you. Thanks.
John, you've got a question.
I don't really understand a lot about dairy. Is it a seasonal fluctuations thing with water temperatures, or is it just been 3 La Niñas, it looks like we're dropping into now? Is that of any consideration, or once it's there, it's there?
Yeah, I think it's sort of, Undaria hasn't really behaved the way people expected in Fiordland, and it just keeps growing. So we would, because we've been in there for so long, we've like every month, whereas normally the work's been focused over particular seasons. We've found that it's still growing and still reproducing right through the year. You get fluctuations where it dies back, but it's not, it's just nasty stuff.
Thanks, Chairman. We've invested a lot in training up some divers. So what happens now then? And access to them?
Yeah, so we've got as many as we're willing on casual contracts with ESL, and we'll be using them in the next year going forward. So we've got a trip coming up down to Rakiura to do follow-up surveillance around that southern end, and we've got 6 of the Jobs for Nature divers on it. So that's really exciting. Yeah.
Well, it is really good because you think about the residual that the project leaves behind. It's just like you said, the opportunities that those divers will have and the skills they've gained to go on to other employment. Any further questions?
With regards to the Darwin Barbary and anything else? That's right, my head of
Hold on there. Yeah. So yeah, sorry, the second project that we've just finished with the Fiordland Buffer project, which was predominantly focused on the Cotoneaster, Dyerns, Barbary, to align with the RPMP. But as I said, I did get a little bit over ambitious and take on other trees, so apologies to my team. But it was a kind of a bundle of multiple different projects. So again, this was around trying to use tourism operators that had been affected by COVID to complete control work as aligned to our RPMP as possible, and essentially to protect Fiordland National Park. So by working in the buffer, we can stop things getting into the national park. Is the theory behind this project. So over the it was 3 seasons, so 3 summers, but 2 years, we had nearly 100 different people involved in doing weed control. Between them, they worked nearly 9 FTE equivalents. There was a little bit of funding left over, and I think we're 1 FTE short, and that was actually because tourism came back during the shoulder seasons more than we were expecting. So the good news is that we didn't spend it because the businesses that were relying on us didn't need it, not because we couldn't find anyone to do the work. But they still managed to achieve a huge amount of control. The budget, I think we got 690 from the department, and we spent 710. But that was always intended. ES has always had a budget for this work, so that was always part of the plan to spend money on this. Within that, we went into 2,500 different sections, so different properties across the Te Anau Manapuri basin. It's pretty much every property in Te Anau, every property in Manapuri. The really good thing about this was that Manapuri was done probably 7-8 years ago, and we were keen to know what was going to happen when we went back. And it was really obvious that Manapuri was in a good state because that worked 7 to 8 years ago. So it was great to go in and redo it, but the weed burden was significantly lower than Te Anau that hadn't had that initial control. So
The weed busters.
the Manapuri weed busters. So the work they did was great, and this has just gone on and built on it. So you can see that the area in orange is where most of the work was done, and we also did like at Milford Sound. So between the teams, they covered 2,000 hectares of control. But they also went in and redid several sites. So the amount that they actually walked and did is huge. But that's every 2,000 hectares got done at least once. They created quite a lot of debris. So where we could, so places like the yacht club, if you walk into the little bush section, find the yacht club, you'll see piles of debris on the ground. So where it was safe to leave it, they did leave it. Where they were taking things out of people's gardens and we're trying to encourage them to replant with something different, we did remove it into a burn pile, which was all done under the air plan, and we have fire service for that. We had to do this twice. There was quite a lot of, there's a couple of hedgerows. So some of it's like properties that the entire hedge was either Cotoneaster or Barbary. So there was several properties that lost quite a few big trees. So that it was all about how to use existing businesses to top up tourism work. So we had people who are divers, we had guides, we had motel cleaners, a whole range of people that had been affected by COVID. Some of the big tourism companies, Trips and Trams, Wings Over Water, like the names that you would see. And it was actually Kylie at Wings and Water who coordinated all of this from Te Anau. So her day job is flying planes, and she took on 15-week contracts to manage this and all of the comms out into the community. So absolutely amazing. I think she's spoken to everybody in the Te Anau basin multiple times.
She's a huge asset to the community.
She's been so good. We gave them all formal training to be able to grow safe, because even though that's not required for the type of work that they were doing, we felt it was important that they understood and had a qualification for the end of it and understood the herbicides they were using. And of those 100 people, that was over 13 different businesses and then 8 sole traders. One of the great things about Kylie and Sue and the rest of the team working out there was the education about weeds, about the risk to Fiordland, about the importance of this work. Because they were such good advocates for the project, we managed to get into every property without having to use Fire Security Act. It was all done voluntarily, which is amazing. That is all down to them and their communication skills. We've also got people taking on weed work of their own, taking on a whole heap of different species and getting really excited about it. And we've got groups now that are saying, we've done all this work, we want this to continue. So they're working with the Department of Conservation on how to maintain the areas that they've done as part of this project. So that has been fantastic. And it's been probably the most visible, one of the most visible ES things in Tiana, probably the time when we've actually talked to the Tiana community more than any other time. Again, there's been heaps of publicity, not as much as the Undaria project, but there's been on One News and a whole heap of different things, as well as letters going out to the community. We opened it up to anybody that wanted to work, come and do the work if they wanted, rather than doing contracting the way we normally would. That did result in higher levels of health and safety management than normal, because we're not using experts, we're having to teach people how to do it. But it was open for everybody. And Kylie and Sue were both nominated for Biosecurity Awards, and they were finalists in the 2022 Biosecurity Award because of the work that they did on this project. So what is the future? So the map shows the dark red line is that 2 kilometre section of Fiordland National Park, the buffer, the 1 kilometre buffer, sorry. We've, through this project, done that little bit of the buffer. We've got until 2029 to clean up the rest of the buffer. One of the things that we've found is that the Cotoneaster is far worse than we anticipated when we put the RPMP together. So we've got some really good information about that, but unfortunately there's a lot more out there. The Barbary is probably what we thought it was. So there is an awful lot of work to do if we're actually going to stop this getting onto into the national park. But it's great that there are people out there now looking for it and telling us and then doing the work. So we've got a challenge to maintain the gains, but we will keep working on it. And as part of our ongoing project and our existing business as usual, we will be maintaining all of that work on private land as much as we can. That's it.
Great teams that you've built up, that you be an observation that you can capture the imagination of people and they want to get involved. That's commendable. Thank you.
I think one point they used the word visible. It's a visible project. And I go back to the previous presentation on the area way over in Fiordland. No one sees it. It's under the water. No one sees it. And it goes back to what Lyndall said. People go, what do I get for my rates?
Yeah.
And there's not, it's not that visibility. And I think that's why we have to work hard. You know, coming out of this, I hope there'll be a communication talking about this fantastic work. Anyway, so.
And congratulations on being spot on budget for all of those things.
And I'd just like to say, and it's more for councillors to comment than a staff member, but these two examples, and for that matter, all of the projects that the team have done have been managed exceptionally well. You know, whether you talk about financial management, project management, relationship with comms, relationship with the contractors, and getting the stuff done on time when this is an example of how well it can be done. So
well, it's quite something considering the difficulties and the logistics, what you're describing over in Fiordland, you know, so yeah.
And it's not the only work that they're doing.
No, both the team leaders that have managed these projects and all of the help we've got from the rest of council is on top of their day jobs. So yes, they're existing projects, but the effort that went into this, the reporting, at one point, Dr. Wanty Day reports, the reporting mode has been huge. So yeah, the community has been fantastic.
Yeah. And the weed project, I think that's a good location. You think of, I see the two towns there, and it's the bike track through the middle of it. That's where you're going to get people going through, isn't it? And probably transporting them seeds and stuff everywhere, so.
Move the recommendation.
That's very good. Anyone second that? That's right. All in favour?
Aye.
Yes, that's carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right. We're doing well, team, we're doing well. So we're going to move into the publicly excluded business, so we're going to move into this session, and I guess there's a good reason for that. You got a reason for that, Damien?
I certainly do. So the motion is that in accordance with section 48(1) of the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act 1987, and the particular interests protected by section 6 or section 7 of that act, the public be excluded from the following parts of the proceedings of this meeting, being the confirmation of minutes from the Regional Services Committee meeting held 2nd of August under section 7(2)J, and item 9, the lease inspection reports under section 7(2)A.
Thank you, Damien. Have I got a movement, please?
I would love to.
Thank you, Eric. John. All those in favour?